I'd like to draw this meeting to open. That didn't sound too intelligent, but anyways, I'd like the call to order and have the clerk please call the roll.
City Council members Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller. Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay. We have the next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes of the January 14th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion?
I will motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Dean Hazen,
I'll second.
Mary Ellis. Were there any corrections to the minutes? I don't see anybody with corrections. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. Will there be any additions to the agenda this evening? No, there will not. All right, we have one item of public input so far. This would be a good time to bring forward a yellow slip if you would like to speak before the City Council, Committee of the Whole. And the individual is Eldris Melinda Carr. And she would like to just comment that she has continued concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision, sewer issues, and equity and historic impact. Anyone else wish to speak before the Committee of the Whole? Okay, thank you. All right, any presentations this evening? None were listed on the agenda, and we have none. Staff report. And we now have information after having an audit. So Financial Director, Elizabeth Hannon. And our auditors.
Yes, I'd like to introduce to you Joe Lightcap, who's a partner with Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus, also known as Baker Tilly, our audit firm. So Joe is going to talk to you about the audit. I did want to point out a few things that just might be helpful. One is that when you look at our audit reports, it's important to remember that these are done on a different basis of accounting than other reports that you see. So for example, when you see the budget and our quarterly financial reports, those are all cash basis, and this is a modified accrual basis of accounting. Also, often the funds are combined in different ways for presentation in the CAFR. So you might notice, like when you see what's called the general fund in the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, it looks really big, and the fund balance looks really big, but that's because it includes a couple of other smaller funds that are combined for the presentation in this report. So I'm going to give it to Joe and have him go at it.
Please entertain and inform us. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So I will go over the three different reports. You may have them in front of you. One of them you may not have. That's okay. I'm going to go over it really quickly. The first one being the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the one with the city's picture on it. There's another report, the communication to those charged with governance and management, that has our logo on the cover. And then there's a report on federal awards. I'll go over that one very briefly. But I'll start with the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And once again, the city has issued this, what we call a CAFR. It is more comprehensive than what is required by accounting standards, provides some more narrative about the city, and also provides some good trend information in the back in the statistical section. So it's more than required, and it's here to provide you a good resource to look back on the fiscal year to see how the city did. I'll be going over at a very high level. Feel free to stop me at any point, ask questions. If there was something that you noticed in your review that I don't go over, feel free to bring that up, and I can try to answer your questions as best I can. But I am going to start with the independent auditor's report. This is page 1. So it's if you have the hard copy, it's right after the financial section tab. So the document, it's all city information. While we help prepare the financial statements, these are really the 3 pages that come from us. In this, once again, we issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the city's financial statements. It's the highest level of assurance you can gain from your outside auditors. And it states that the information within is reasonable in all material respects and can be reasonably relied upon by an outside user. Something on the opinion I wanted to point out on page 2 is an emphasis of the matter paragraph. This, if you were to compare it to last year, this is a new paragraph because the city, along with other June 30th year-end local governments, adopted GASB 75 this year. This is the accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pensions. So because Illinois statutes allow retirees to stay on the city's insurance, they pay the full cost, but they're allowed to stay on the insurance. The fact that when you have a retiree on your insurance plan, that raises the rates of insurance. This is it's what's called an implicit rate subsidy. So there is a cost by the state allowing you to have these retirees on your plan. And what accounting standards make us do, well, make the city hire an actuary to say, okay, what is the cost of having these retirees on your plan? And it's like today is, it's brought back into the financial statements as of June 30th. So the employees that are working and the retirees, it kind of gives a cost related to those employees. It doesn't change your insurance costs, is what you pay on a cash basis, but it does provide, on one of the schedules we'll look at in a second, it provides a liability for these amounts. Because of the adoption of the standard, we were required to restate prior year net position. When I say net position, that's got all of the city's funds together, and it's got all of the assets and liabilities of the city. It's got capital assets, it's got long-term debt, it's got everything you can think of, including this other post-employment benefit liability. The amount of the restatement was about $3.3 million in the governmental activities. So the net position, if we were to look at ending net position last year, compared it to the beginning net position in this report is down about $3.3 million as a result of the adoption of the standard. I want to highlight briefly the next tab, the management's discussion and analysis. This is a great document written by management with a high-level comparison of prior year. It's in more English than the rest of the report. It's just a good place to look to see what really happened and management's take on what happened. I'm going to skip over that document. It's very easily readable. So I go to the basic financial statements and the statement of net position. This is the statement I was talking about a little bit ago that has all of the capital assets, all of the funds. It includes a column for the library as well. And you can see that the non-current liability is about 3/4 of the way down, due in more than 1 year. The $39.3 million in governmental activities, that includes the other post-employment benefit liability that I was just talking about. Also includes net pension liabilities for police, fire, and IMRF, and the debt of the city. On the following page is the income statement for all the funds and all of the assets and liabilities. You can see that even though this large liability was put on the financial statements this year, that change year over year wasn't that dramatic, and the change in net position increased about $300,000 for governmental activities, went down about $230,000 for business type activities. Go forward a little bit to page 24 and 25. This is a little bit more of what you would be used to seeing, revenues and expenditures by fund, but as Elizabeth mentioned, there are different combinations of funds than you're used to seeing, and these also have short-term, well, the first schedule has all your long-term capital assets and debt. These schedules are on what we call the modified accrual basis, and they only have short-term receivables and payables. So they would include anything owed to you at June 30th or any bills that were due at June 30th, but just not paid yet. One of the things we look at is how much the fund balance the general fund has. And you look at how many months in reserves. Now this does have more than your corporate fund in there, but there's about 5 months in reserves in the general fund, up about a month from last year, and the fund itself went up about $2.8 million. On page 25, you can see all of the funds, all the governmental funds of the city went up about $870,000 compared to the prior year. Following this, there is some information on the city's business type activities, the parking fund, and then the internal service funds. On page 29, you can see again that the parking fund, the net position decreased about $200,000. And then there's a cash flow statement on the following page. You can see cash went down about the same amount. Following this, there's information on the pension funds. You can see how much assets and liabilities in that position on page 32 and the income statement on page 33. Following the statement of changes in fiduciary net position, there's the notes to the financial statements. This is a good spot if you want to really get into the details of what the different balances are made up of, the different accounting policies of the city. You can see that in those quite a few pages from page 35 to 86. I won't go over that in detail either. That gets very complex, but should you have any questions, we can definitely go over them. The last thing I wanted to kind of go over tonight in this document is the required supplementary information. So on page 87 and 88, you can see the budget and actual comparison for the general fund. Once again, you can see all the revenues kind of by line item, by source, by different type, and you can see expenditures by departments and then by personnel, materials and supplies, and contractual services. You can see how the budget, how the actual amounts fared with the budget. And real quick on page 91, so I know the last couple of years, the last 4 years, the city has been required to record a net pension liability for IMRF, police and fire. So now we're getting some good kind of trend information on those liabilities. On page 91 for IMRF, you can see about 3/4 of the way down the employer's net pension liability. This year was about $2.1 million, down from $8.4 million in the prior year. This was largely a result of investment earnings. This is measured at 12/31 because IMRF, that's their year end, and they provide all of their members. So you can see at the end of 2017, the investment market values were very high, so it made the assets look high, and then the net liability look low. That amount doesn't go right to your bottom line. It gets kind of amortized over a few years to allow for blips in investment values to kind of smooth out over time. But it is a good schedule to see kind of what it's doing. IMRF looks at this, of course, and would adjust your rate, and they're very good with the long-term perspective on this, and the rate tends not to fluctuate too much year over year. The police pension fund on page 93 and 94, you can see that 94 has the net pension liability of about $20.6 million, up a little bit from the prior year of $19.7 million. That was related to kind of some change in assumptions and experience compared to the prior year, to the actuary, what they thought would happen compared to what actually happened. On the fire pension on page 98, fire pension net pension liability went down from $9.1 million to about $8.6 million. Just want to kind of point out this trend year over year. It doesn't, it could fluctuate on how much you contribute to the police and fire, and shows you kind of the funded percentages as well. The rest of the document has some additional budget actual schedules, and then the statistical section that I mentioned before, kind of the long-term, last 10 years history of different balances of the city. That's all I had on the comprehensive annual financial report, unless there were any questions.
Are there other questions?
I have
Yes, Dean.
one question, I guess, for city staff is, if I'm understanding the two different reports correctly between fire and UPD, fire is funded at like 85%, and the UPD is funded at about 63% or 66%. Okay, I'm just wondering why there's such a disparity.
So there's probably not just one reason for that. I mean, it probably has to do with, assumptions that are used by the actuary, which can be different for the two funds. But the other part, the thing that I have noticed most is that over time, since I've been here, the investment returns in the police pension fund are simply not as good as the investment returns in the fire pension fund. That's part of it. It's not the only thing.
All right, thank you.
Were there other questions raised? Okay.
All right.
Do you want to go to other parts of
Yep.
the report? No?
Okay, I will go to the communication to those charged with governance and management. This document satisfies a few different auditing reporting requirements on our part. So as I mentioned before in the CAFR, that's pretty much 99% city information. This document is almost 100% Baker Tilly information, but it kind of gives you the non-financial highlights during the year. The first audit standard that it satisfies is on page 1, which is the report on internal control. We are required to look at the city's internal controls to help plan the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. Not to provide council with an opinion on internal controls, but if something comes to our attention that we feel is important to present to council, that is when it makes it to this letter. Whether we think it's what we call a significant deficiency, something that we think the council should know about, or a material weakness, which we think the lack of an internal control could result in a material misstatement to the financial statements. These comments are pretty consistent with what you've seen in the past here at the city, but I did want to point out with the change in the general ledger package last year, it happened mid-year for a lot of the different functions and a lot of different cycles. Because a control changed or improved during the year, we still have to report on the control for the entire year. So that's why you'll see a lot of the comments. You'll see similar comments to last year, but you'll also see, especially in management's response, how it's been improved under the new system. So next year when we come out to audit the 6/30/19, we'll be looking at the full year of the new system, and it's very likely that a lot of these comments will go away. We'll still have to test them and see that they're working as designed, but there's been a lot of good improvements in the internal controls at the city. There was always good compensating controls. You know, the finance office always understood kind of some of the spots in the general ledger that were susceptible, and there's always good checks and balances on that. But now you have a general ledger package that has some of those things built in as well, which is that much better in the grand scheme of things. I wasn't going to go over any of the comments because you've seen them in the past, but unless there were questions, it says skip ahead to page 6. This is kind of an important piece of this document because when we're out here doing the audit, we work with management to do our tests and to get questions answered, but we really work for council. So I want you to know that should you have any questions, concerns, to please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to address those. There's certain items in this part of the letter that you can look to and kind of pique your interest. And if there's ever anything you want to talk to us about, we're definitely open to have those conversations. The next piece is just some more informational points. Starting on page 9, there's a document, a letter that kind of helps you understand the implementation of the accounting standard I mentioned earlier. And then there's a few pages of some upcoming accounting standard changes. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they like to keep everyone on their toes. So there's usually a pretty big standard every year or every other year. So this kind of gives you some information on things coming down the pipe. Obviously, we'll work with management to get these implemented as seamlessly as possible, but there's just some more information for you where you could see your financial statements changing in the upcoming years. The last piece of this document is the required communications by the auditor to those charged with governance. This letter is fairly a stock letter, which is good because this letter would go over any disagreements with management, any kind of weird accounting treatment that we saw, and we're happy to report that there's none. So it's a pretty straightforward letter. And then following that is there's some representations. It's pretty much letters from management stating that they gave us everything that we asked for, in a lot more detail than that, but that's kind of the gist of those letters. So with that, I will open it up to any questions on that communication.
All right, so would there be questions concerning the communication to those charged with the governance and management, which we just reviewed? So it seemed like we are making some improvements in recording, and also one of the things that came up, I'm not sure if it was in this document, that was the you had a concern about the how the payroll was managed and how many people were using as checks and balances who didn't do too many jobs in concerning the output of the payroll and the appropriate checking for the amounts that were being distributed. So, but you did indicate that it was reasonable for a community our size not to be covering those with individual employees.
Yeah, when you have a small department, it's hard to get the standard we look at is across all industries, public sector, private sector. So it's a pretty high bar. So when you get down to the local government where there's constraints on staffing sizes, you do run into these kinds of issues, and that's where the GL system can really kind of help in this area. There's always been good checks and balances and overarching compensating controls to make sure things look reasonable. And these comments also, they're not to say that we found anything related to them. It's very much a theoretical exercise comparing the city's controls to a standard and kind of seeing where they could be improved.
So you're showing us best practice, if possible. Yeah.
So
Elizabeth.
just to help maybe make this a little more real, I'll give you an example in the payroll system. In the old system, the person who was processing the payroll, who was issuing the checks, was also the same person who was entering changes in pay rates and such. And so this never happened, and I wouldn't expect it to ever happen, but it would be theoretically possible for that person to change her own pay rate and then pay herself a larger amount, as an example of, this is the kind of things that we have to think about. What's everything that could go wrong, and how do we make sure that can't happen? And so in the Munis financial system now, the changes in pay rates are all managed by HR, so they're able to do that. And the person who's entering the payroll doesn't have to make those changes, and in fact is not able to make those changes. And so we've just eliminated that, what I'll call an opportunity for somebody who would maybe be less than honest.
So a completely different department within the city is managing the,
Right, but in addition, there's many places in the new financial system where we have multiple approval levels that also provide controls as things, move through a particular process.
great. Other comments or questions? Okay.
The third document, real quick, is a single audit. Every year, the city, if you have certain level of expenditures of federal programs, $750,000, you're required to have an audit of the controls and compliance around the major program. As it has been in the past, we tested the home program. There was no findings or over compliance or controls over compliance. So it's a good report in that regard as well.
Well, it sounds like we're pretty healthy as far as the ethics of the financial department.
I think so. We have a lot of good employees in the finance department.
Yeah, I know it's been improved quite a bit, and so I do appreciate that. Yes, Mary Alice.
Can I ask one question before we close this?
Oh,
So
yes.
I think this is more for staff. I was looking at the two separate reports on the pensions. And so I think on one, it's page 11 and page 12, and the other one's on page 12 and page 13. Firefighters is 12 and 13. What I was trying to understand as I looked at these numbers is the employer contributions. So if I look at the employer contributions, it's continually gone down since 2014. in both the police and the fire, and I wanted to know if you could speak to that.
Sure, this is, you might remember, in June last year, the council adopted as part of its financial policies, a new policy on pension funding. So what you're seeing there is, what you're seeing is the result of when pension funding was reduced in order to balance the budget, which increased property tax revenue to the general fund. And so now the council has made a very specific decision to reverse that. So when you levy taxes in 2018, property taxes that we'll receive in 2019, that's going to go up and continue to go up for a few years until we reach that path that we decided to be on, which was we want to be 100% funded in 20 years.
So really, it's just kind of a timing issue, is what I'm hearing you say?
No,
So-
it's not just a timing issue. There was a decision made when we levied taxes in 2014 to reduce funding for pensions, and that was done in 2 steps. Initially, there was a small reduction, and then it was reduced to the minimum required by state law.
I guess my question is, in 2000, we pass a budget every year. So I guess what I was surprised about was in 2018, which was, that's why I'm thinking of timing here.
Yeah.
Would be reflective of it ends in July 1st, June 30th.
June 30, it's the year that ended June 30,
It's-
2018.
Right, so that would be like the last year in which we had decreased pension funding to the
Oh, yeah, so.
minimum. Does that
Okay,
make
so
sense
the
in terms of
timing
timing?
of when you receive property tax
Right.
revenues is a little confusing. So in fiscal year 2018, we received about the last half of revenue from the 2016 tax levy and the first half of revenue from the 2017 tax levy. And so, yeah, so there's a delay from when you levy taxes to when you receive it.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Is it a fair paraphrase of what happened that in 2014, we started borrowing money from the pension funds to balance our budget? Although we didn't extract money from the funds, but we didn't put money in that was actuarially indicated, and now we've decided not to do that anymore.
Yeah, technically, we didn't borrow money, but we funded less than would be required by our current policy.
Yeah.
Mayor?
We basically underfunded pensions to balance the budget, which we're not doing anymore.
Correct. That's fixed with the new policy you approved in June, and the first implementation of that was with the 2018 tax levy that you approved in December.
Which is paid in 2019.
Yes, which is revenue that we'll
Yeah.
receive in 2019. Yes.
Dean?
So regarding funding the police versus the fire pensions, does an equal amount of money go to each one annually, or do you adjust based on the performance of their portfolios, or how does that work?
So the amount that we fund is based on a report provided by our actuary, and there are many factors that go into that, including what they're earning on investment income, their projected pension payments, over the long term, 30 years, actuarial assumptions about how long people are going to live, at what age people are going to retire. It's what actuaries do is a little bit mysterious. But I'd be happy to share the most recent actuarial reports if you want to kind of dig into that and see.
No, just curious.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
Well, yeah,
realize there
it's-
were so many factors in it.
It's complicated. They're looking out at a very long period of time to see what our expected future obligations are, and then trying to determine how we meet those obligations.
Thank you.
Bill Brown?
Yeah, thanks. I had a couple comments on the CAFR, is that what you call it?
CAFR,
CAFR, the comprehensive report. I think it's nice looking at these because it gives you all these facts and figures, but it also gives you kind of a broader overview. The part that's more narrative about what's going on in the city, who our biggest employers are, things like that. And I think if I'm reading someone else's CAFR, I know nothing about, that's all I read, is really the narrative to try to get a sense of what the city's about. But I wanted to comment on one of those under major initiatives. On the enterprise zone, it says there's been 48 projects containing 230 residential units. I think last year that was around, it was under 100, 50 some. So I know that this year we had the big multifamily development on Lincoln Avenue be permitted, and I'm sure a lot of those are included in there. And I have concerns about that because when we first passed the ordinance for the enterprise zone, we were told it was going to be focusing, the residential part would be focusing on single family and duplex properties, zero lot line townhomes, things like that. So I'm concerned that the enterprise zone incentives are being given to multifamily housing projects. And I guess that maybe the ordinance implementing it, I know I looked through all the material we were given at the time, November, December 2014. And I didn't see anything about multifamily except for mixed-use developments where 20% of it is 20% of it is commercial, and I had some other requirements about job creation and stuff, but nothing about big multifamily housing projects. So I'm concerned about that. I'd like to have a review of, whether we need to make any changes in that ordinance, maybe some corrections or technical changes in order to get the enterprise zone aligned with the intention that it was passed with. I know, I remember the discussions at the time. One of the big things was we had a lot of empty streets around Behringer Commons and Stone Creek. We wanted to fill those with single-family homes because we're already supporting the infrastructure, plowing the roads, things like that. And it was also sold to us as a replacement for Build Urbana, which was a project that basically made up the difference between single-family homes in Urbana and Champaign. So I'd like to have some information about why that's being applied to multifamily housing projects and what we can do to fix it to get it back to the original intent.
Carol, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I think I'd like to understand better sort of the real scope of what you're asking for, because there were a lot of layers of what you were just saying, because undertaking something like revisiting the scope of the enterprise zone itself is that's a pretty significant body of work that we don't have staff time to perform anytime soon. So if you're looking for some clarifications, maybe that's something we could do relatively easily. But if you're looking for some kind of overhaul, that's another matter entirely. And part of when I say clarification, that's clarifying intent versus clarifying anything by changing the enterprise zone itself. Because that, as I understand it, was a years-long effort to get.
Yeah, I
implemented.
understand that. I know there's ways to amend enterprise zones, and hopefully we don't have to go down that path. I think there are also ways to make technical adjustments, or maybe just clarify rules of implementation
Mhm.
to make sure that they align with the original intent. Because the original intent says that they would abatement of property taxes is permitted on the increased property value resulting from new eligible projects on commercial, industrial, mixed-use projects, and that was for the commercial industrial. For the new the title of it is property tax abatement for new single-family duplex residential development. It says for that, it's supposed to abatement of property taxes permitted on the increased property value resulting from new eligible single-family zero-lot line townhome and duplex residential projects. So I still don't see how multifamily projects fit into that. So I think clarification might be a good word.
Okay, so could you and I agree to get together and so that I can understand precisely what you want focused
Sure.
on?
I mean, I've expressed this concern to the mayor, to you, and to staff before.
Yeah, and I want to address it. It's part of it is I'm just at a disadvantage because I wasn't here. So if you could share the documentation with me so I know exactly what to focus on, I'd appreciate
Sure,
it.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thanks.
And so that was a question about appropriate application, really, wasn't that? Okay. Well, we all want to try to apply our ordinances appropriately. All right. So does that summarize the representation by Baker and Tilly?
That is all I have, yes.
Okay. Do we need to accept the audit? Is there some kind of like functional aspect of the city council that would accept the audit, or we just are listening to it?
Heck, let's vote on it.
All right. All right. It's not a
I'm
votable item, is
kidding.
it? So
I'm
it's
kidding.
just a presentation. Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you for driving down from the Chicago area tonight and wish you safe travels on your way home.
Thank you.
We'll go to Black Dog on my back, so it'll be fine.
Good choice. Good choice.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was the only piece of on the agenda concerning staff reports or presentations to the city committee of the whole. So we're going to go now to the first ordinance, which is ordinance number 2019-01-012. An ordinance vacating portions of certain streets, and these are Orchard Street between Church Street and the University Avenue, and Park Street between Orchard Street and McCullough. And this has to do with property that's within what you would call the campus of Carl Hospital. Yes, Brad Bennett.
Thank you. Brad Bennett, interim co-city engineer. What I've got before you tonight is a proposed vacation of two sections of street. The first is Park Street between McCullough and Orchard. It is approximately 0.61 acres. And then the second street is Orchard Street between Church Street and University Avenue. That street right away amounts to 0.88 acres. To give you a little bit of history and background, this right-of-way was originally proposed to have been vacated back in 1992-93 era. At the time, there was no public notice or public hearing before the proposed street right-of-way vacations were brought to council. There was such a public uproar at the time that the vote on the right-of-way vacation was tabled because of the lack of public notice and hearing, and the council actually adopted an ordinance, which was 92-93-97, which was actually entitled, "An Ordinance Requiring a Public Hearing Prior to Vacating of a Street." So, kind of jumping forward a couple years, in 1995, as part of a development agreement with Carl Hospital. In that agreement, it included the closure of those two streets, not the vacation of the right-of-way, but the closure so that they could be converted into a pedestrian wall as part of Carl's campus. So those streets have been non-functional as far as part of our transportation system since that time period. We wanted to move forward with this vacation. We think it's long overdue. We did go through our normal process with the street vacation. We got a request from Carl. We contacted all the utility companies as well as city staff. No one had any objections to the vacation of those two proposed streets. And then on the financial side of it, because these are non-residential properties, the city is to be paid the fair market value for those properties. So in September 2018, we hired Wizit, who's an appraiser that did an appraisal of those right-of-way for those two streets. And Wizit came up with a cost of $500,000, or I guess I should say a value of $500,000 for those two streets. We presented that to Carl. Carl's board approved that on December 14th. We did go through the proper public notice and hearing this time for the street vacation. The publication was issued on December 18th, 2018, and we had the public hearing here on January 7th, 2019. So with that, I guess I'll open it up to any questions. We do have Tom Johnson here from from Carl. If you guys have any questions that I can't answer that would be specific to Carl, he said he would be glad to come up and answer that, so.
So are there questions for Brad or Carl, or the representative from Carl? Sure, Cerise?
I just want to clarify, the streets that are being vacated, my understanding from driving through there, is that Orchard is blocked, correct? With land or curb and everything else on one side, the side that you're talking about vacating, I think. And then there's Orchard Street going in, an entrance into Carl for the parking structure and into the main lobby. So you're you're officially vacating, I suppose, the area, the street that is blocked, the part of Orchard that's blocked?
Yeah, I mean, really,
Because it's like,
it's not a functional street.
Right.
We're not proposing any changes to the way that it's currently configured as far as the entrance into the parking deck or access, to the Carl facilities. This just would vacate.
okay.
that
And with
property.
Park Street, is that still going to be open to a certain area where, you can drive in? There's some construction going on there now.
Yes.
So would that remain an area that you drive into? That used to be the breezeway or something, wasn't it? I'm
Yeah, Tom,
trying.
do you want to come up and talk a
Yeah,
little
come
bit?
on up,
'Cause I
because I
know
need
there
to
are some,
understand. Isn't that the breezeway thing?
Correct.
that
That's the breezeway entrance.
Uh-huh.
The construction you see there now is, we're bumping that entrance out there. We're trying to create a single point of entry into the hospital. So there will be a circle turnaround there after the construction is done. That's just blocked off right now because
Okay.
of construction traffic. But there will be a circle turnaround there, and the idea is to create a more comprehensive entrance with a lot of patient services up front, an expanded coffee shop, a chapel, a gift shop, and a larger entryway. It makes it a little bit more focused. People come in the right entrance then to get to where they need to go.
Okay, so you're gonna have two gift shops then, one on the Orchard Street?
No. What we'll do is the other entrance where those services currently are now, those departments will be vacated, and we will expand some clinical services in there, hopefully to lessen the pressure on the ED. The emergency department is very busy, and we need to kind of reclaim some space. So we're moving those patient or the visitor functions over so that we can repurpose those areas for patient care.
Okay, so the breezeway entrance then is going to be more for patient care, is what you're saying, or no?
No, the breezeway entrance will be that visitor entrance.
Right,
With
okay.
all the amenities for visitors coming in, gift shop, chapel, coffee shop. Those things that are over towards the Orchard entrance now, those departments will be vacated, and we'll be able to create some clinical space in there to
Okay.
offload the ED.
Okay. Just wanted
Sure.
to understand how that was gonna go, okay.
So do we. It was confusing at first.
So it's basically vacated anyway?
Correct. The
and-
streets are
yeah.
vacated anyway. Carl has been responsible for maintaining them and
Well, let's not
Clearing
say
the
vacated, let's
Sorry.
say closed.
closed.
Yeah, we're going through a vacation tonight. They've been closed for
Okay,
years.
basically, yeah, they're closed anyway to through traffic.
Correct.
Okay, sorry, the whole thing. Okay, so it's basically close to through traffic now, and has been for years.
Correct.
And this is an official, that thing that's just going to say
Vacated.
it's
We're
vacated.
following the process.
Right, okay, okay.
And I guess one thing I'll point out too, it's in the memo, but I didn't mention it in my talk, is that we will be keeping some easements for where the right-of-way is, because there are some existing utilities there. And that's, what we learned through the process of contacting utilities, finding out what they need. So even though we're vacating the right-of-way, there'll still be easements that cover any existing utilities that remain.
Okay, yeah, because I know with the Orchard Street, there's some kind of utility, something there, I don't know, boiler room or whatever. It's there, I just know that there is something there that's a building that holds something there.
The power plant's over on
Yeah.
Kohler.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's what it is. But there's something there, yeah. Okay, I just wanted to understand the geography of everything.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Alice.
So, as we saw tonight, and as we've heard from Elizabeth many times, that when there's a unexpected amount of income, that should be paid to pensions or to the VERF fund. So I'm wondering, to city staff, what is the plan for the $500,000 if we do approve this?
As you know, we have a capital project, MCOR Phase 5, that we have a financial responsibility to fund, and we're expecting that that will be underfunded when it's time to begin next year, and so we plan to put this money towards the shortfall of the MCOR Phase 5 project.
And if there is any left over from that?
It's unlikely that that would be the case.
Current
I just want to
We don't
push
have-
it into the pension fund.
Current underfunding is 550,000, and it'll probably increase before the project actually starts, so.
Good question. All right, so any other questions for concerning the Carl Street vacations? All right, so those, can I hear a motion? Yes, Mary Alice.
I'll move the ordinance number 2019-01012, an ordinance vacating portions of certain streets from Orchard Street between Church and University Avenue and Park Street between Orchard Street and McCullough Street, be approved. Is that right?
To council.
Oh, we're in committee of the whole, I'm sorry.
We're in committee of the whole.
Thank you. To council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Okay. Bill Brown. All right, other discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, and opposed? All right, that passes, and that'll go forward to the city council.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank legal and community development for all their help on this. So thanks to those two divisions and departments.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. All right, next is a resolution 2019-01-002R, a resolution regarding the release of certain closed session minutes, meeting minutes, and approving the destruction of certain verbatim records of closed session meetings. This is for the period ending January 31st, 2019. City Clerk. Charlie.
Yeah, my voice will hold out long enough here. This is the usual resolution that you get every 6 months, releasing those minutes that are appropriate and holding those confidential. Otherwise, there's one small change to the resolution. I'd like to add the two topics, single meeting from last Tuesday, to the list of, with the usual asterisk that council hasn't reviewed these, to the Schedule B. So there'll be a little change in the final version next week. So I'd simply ask that this be sent to council with a recommendation for approval.
And so you're going to be adding two,
Just the meeting from last week, the meeting from last week, which has property acquisition and property sale on it, will be added with the usual asterisk at the bottom of Schedule B.
all right.
I'd just like to keep it a list of everything that's out there.
All right, you're just becoming a little more up to date. Any conversation or questions for Charlie concerning the release of these minutes? Yes, Eric.
I just want to make a clarification for people who may be watching this or will watch it, that the actual decision on these minutes was discussed in closed session, which is in conformity with state law, Open Meetings Act, that this is permitted. So we're not just, rubber stamping without thinking about it, some list that Charlie's given us.
And these are fairly old minutes, is that correct, Charlie? Yes.
Yes, it's a minute, and it should be noted that the typical set of minutes that gets released every 6 months, one set is the minutes of that previous closed session discussing the closed minutes.
And now Jim wants to say that I stated something slightly or majorly wrong with respect to the law.
Go ahead.
Just to summarize the
Clarification.
law, you did not mangle. No formal action was taken during a closed session. It was discussed whether certain minutes should be kept confidential and whether other minutes could be released, and the final action will be taken in open session. There's never an action taken in a closed session.
Right.
Very good. All right, so then the question is, shall we then pass this resolution and release minutes? Do we have a motion?
I move that we pass this resolution on to the council with a recommendation for approval.
Will there be a second?
I second it.
Okay. Ms. Searcy? All right. Further comments? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none, so that passes and goes forward. This being the last piece of information, unless there is an announcement from anybody, the mayor, none? All right, then we call adjournment of this committee of the whole.
10 minutes to 8.
Are we going to?